Marc Marquez is on the brink of the 2025 MotoGP title, but we've known that for quite a few months. So the most exciting thing to come out of Misano was the guy who forced him into a big mistake on Saturday and nearly beat him on Sunday. Marco Bezzecchi, a rider we praised so much here on the Race MotoGP podcast earlier in his career, but who then went missing for a season, was back to his very best. And for a few months now, Simon and Val, it's felt like Bez has been the person most likely to topple Marc in a race. But still, this felt like a big weekend for just a breakthrough performance, really, Simon. This was Bez looking like a real threat for the rest of the season from here.
This was Bez looking like a factory Aprilia rider. No, but seriously, I mean that. Like, this is Marco Bezzecchi, the guy that they signed to be a factory racer. This isn't the guy that was kind of hit or miss at VR 46, that had his moments and was quick but then disappeared or whatever. This was the full package. This was a factory rider. He kind of ticked all the boxes. He was fast in qualifying. He looked super consistent all weekend. Everything went like as well as I possibly could have for him. Just super solid weekend. The sort of weekend that I don't think we've ever really seen Bezzecchi with before, from kind of start to finish. And it came at a circuit. I mean, it came a week late, because we'd be having a really different conversation right now if this had happened 7 days ago at Barcelona, a circuit where the Aprilia has always been super good. And we had a similar conversation last week in the podcast. And I actually told Massimo Rivola sitting outside Aprilia Hospitality last night, the team boss, that we had the conversation in the podcast, because he was a bit like, well, we should have been quicker last week, and I don't know why we're quick this week. And I was like, because the bike now seems to be good everywhere, and they've lost a bit of their advantage at the traditional Aprilia circuits, but they've made up for it by being good everywhere. And they've got a rider who seems to be knocking on the door of being pretty good everywhere. And it's all coming together as a really complete package. The only thing that's missing for the whole Aprilia show right now is the fact that Jorge Martin missed the first half of the season and he isn't where he needs to be yet. But this looks like a team next year that can fight, Marc Marquez, because there's not a Ducati team to fight the way that there was 12 months ago. There's not, you know what I mean? It's Marc Marquez that everyone has to beat next year. And this looks like a package that can all in all do it, with the three strong elements of both riders in the bike.
Val, I noticed when Simon said this was a kind of weekend we haven't seen from Bez before, that you did a kind of eye roll that looked like you were scanning Bez's entire career history and all the statistics and all your performance notes from it. What was the outcome of that?
My memory is not great. Like, just without going into Wikipedia or other available statistics resources. I do think he's done some really good Assen weekends, and I think Argentina, there was a really good Argentina weekend during
wasn't there an Indian Grand Prix weekend as well, where he was insanely better than everybody else?
Yeah, but the thing about those weekends is they've always been like Argentina's a Bezzecchi track, and India was the first time and only time we've ever went there, and he's never really been a Misano specialist.
I kind of know what you mean. Yeah, I understand. Then
it felt like a level
something to
it.
It's just we value performances at a conventional track like this, where everybody goes 50 times a year, not just the VR 46 guys, but everybody all obviously tests on. Everybody knows like the back of their hand. So there is some extra value to that. I do think Aprilia has not historically been terrible here. I vaguely remember that it had like a good run or two with Maverick Viñales like a couple of years ago, and it's obviously it's the opposite to Barcelona. Barcelona's this, super low grip. Misano has the best grip on the calendar, but at the same time, some of these high speed corners, you wouldn't necessarily say this is a true stop and goer like, I don't know, Motegi, I guess. No. I want to see how Motegi goes. I'm quite interested in seeing how Motegi goes, and maybe that'll finally allow us to get close to maybe completing the picture of how actually Aprilia stacks up relative to the various Ducatis at play.
We're actually in a really good run of form for determining where they are at, actually, I think. Because we've gone from Barcelona, which should have been an Aprilia track and a super low grip, to here, which is super high grip with those big fast corners, to Motegi, which is stop and go. Those three races kind of give us a good measure of where the project's at. The bike project, at least, if the rider project's a bit different right now.
That's good. I'm going to jump down the list of things we're going to talk about a little bit because you've raised something there that fits the question from Radwan Bello in the Race Members Club on Patreon. Radwan says, new member here. And by the way, loads of you are asking questions for the first time at the moment. Loads of you join the Members Club. We really massively appreciate it. Every kind of fresh face and new name is really exciting for us. All the old loyalists who have been asking us questions since the very beginning are loved equally. But yeah,
there's some people that are going to have to cut themselves right back to like 9 questions instead of 17 in a weekend now.
I mean, the Race F1 podcast insists that you send one question, but in fairness, they have like several hundred more people asking questions every week than we do. But anyway, Ridwan Bello says, new member here. Last year, Simon said we were going to see the end of Ducati domination in 2024. With the way the other teams are improved, are we truly seeing the end of the domination? Now, obviously, this race still finished with 5 Ducatis in the top 6. So on paper, you'd say no. But I see the point Ridwan is making here. That Aprilia was very close to beating Marquez to 2 victories this weekend. And like you say, it's showing form on a whole range of tracks.
So the end of Ducati dominance was never going to happen overnight, and it was never going to happen on one circuit and one weekend. It was going to be like a slow process where we look back in a year's time and went, oh, so that's over now. That era is over. And I still think we're doing that. We're not seeing... They're still very quick, but they're beatable. At least 5 of them are beatable. And that's a bit of a new thing. And I think... Yeah, okay. I may have been slightly... There might have been a slight bit of hyperbole whenever I said the Ducati dominance is over. But I think what I've said quite a bit... No, I think... That's obviously thinking that I'm trying to backtrack here. What I've said more often...
I can't believe that you felt you've ever been hyperbolic.
What I've said more often is that the last winter testing was the last ever testing cycle where Ducati gained on their rivals rather than the rivals gaining on them. At least of this current era, things might change. But it's felt like Ducati have been pulling ahead of everyone for years and years and years. And that's flipped and it's gone the other way. And we're starting to see a little bit of that now. We're starting to see the guys come the other way. And here we are.
I do understand why it feels different. Like, I think there is a point there. At the same time, it does help that Ducati basically completely whiffed in its season-to-season development this year. And we're yet to see what exactly is going to happen in the off-season for 2026. And the time is running out before we kind of reset with the new regulations. Although there are, I think, different opinions on just how much of a true reset this will be, because it will depend on... it's not just the bike design carryover. It's also the buildup of knowledge and which of the areas of knowledge are most important. If aero just continues to be more and more and more and more important, then, there's a complication there in terms of reeling in Ducati potentially. I get it, but at the same time, even Bezzecchi himself said that Ducati still retains this advantage in the sort of the second half of the race when the tire gets used up a bit. And obviously Misano doesn't stress tire wear particularly, but he is probably correct. And it just feels like we're still not in a situation where, the Ducatis are beatable. I just don't know that we're in the situation that they're beatable by the same guy week in, week out. Even the non-Marquez Ducati, I still feel there's a bit of rotation baked in, maybe, although Bezzecchi has been doing a really good job.
Yeah, that's the bit that's standing out for me now. It just feels like for genuinely a few months now, we've been saying week in, week out that Bez is the one who's there. And okay, obviously he had the Silverstone win, but that fell out of the blue on a weird weekend for Ducati. That didn't necessarily feel... The Ducati drop that weekend was so weird and big that it didn't feel repeatable, whereas this actually feels like business as usual in MotoGP now is Marc Marquez and Marco Bezzecchi at the front fighting for wins. And anything outside that is a bit of a blip, and it comes back to that situation again and again. So yeah, I feel like this is stabilizing to quite an exciting normal. Obviously, we'll get to Jorge Martin in a minute because we've got a few questions about him. The fact Jorge Martin's bike broke down before the race started, that's a sort of Aprilia at the Flyaways vibe for me. That shouldn't be happening while they're still in Europe. That's a teeny worry. In a year when actually generally Aprilia's been solid reliability-wise compared to recent seasons, but it's this end of the season when it really starts to to wobble there usually, isn't it?
I mean, did it lose the chain three separate times?
No, we will come on
to
that other manufacturer that's flinging chains around its riders all weekend later as well. Fair point. We should talk about Bez himself a little bit more before we move on from Aprilia, because like I said at the outset, we spent last year criticising him quite a lot. Ryan O'Byrne says, was last year just a complete blip and now Bez is back to his best, or even his best, which I quite like that. If you're a newish MotoGP fan, after impressing so much, albeit a bit crashily as a rookie, Bezzecchi then mounted a season-long title challenge on the old spec Ducati in 2023. And then 2024, you'd be hard-pressed to notice he was there most weekends. It was a massive form drop-off. He was nowhere near his 2023 performances. Val, all the way through last year, Bez put it down to a very specific thing. The way he's performing now, he's settled onto the Aprilia, suggests that was absolutely valid. But personally, I still feel a little bit like you need to be adaptable enough to get through that kind of problem and perform at a higher level than he was last year.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think ultimately we would only lab test it by putting him back on the GP23 or even just any sort of Ducati, because, I mean, clearly the issue was much lesser with the Ducati actually designed for that new rear tire that was the bane of Bezzecchi's existence, that offered too much grip that he didn't want. But clearly, I do think the Aprilia just works in a different way. I don't remember Aprilia riders mentioning the rear pushing the front. I mean, maybe they do, but it's
never really been an Aprilia issue.
Yeah, it's never been like loud. Like this weekend, the KTM's mentioning it a whole lot, but Brad Binder in particular. I say the KTM's, I mean Brad Binder in particular. It's, like just not feeling the front support and the mismatch on the grip on the rear, grip on the front, and it feels like the Aprilia has just sort of been compliant in that regard, generally speaking. But I might be wrong, and also it's very individual rider dependent. It's not come up from Bezzecchi's end generally this season, has it? The big issue was that the bike felt unstable to ride, particularly over one lap, and that's been dialed out. They've basically developed it into a much sweeter thing. Martin still finds it a bit unstable, but in a different way that it's sort of up to him to resolve rather than through bike changes, and up to like comfort, that kind of thing.
Given that they're such good friends, do you think like Pecco Bagnaia and Marco Bezzecchi share coping strategies and anecdotes about getting a new Ducati and suddenly your season disappearing off the face of the planet? Because like, maybe there's kind of comparisons can be made.
Yeah. Although I think Pecco's slump, maybe because Pecco's slump was from an even higher place, it feels more painful, more dramatic, and more puzzling.
And his is because he got a new bike that's worse, not an old bike that's worse.
Yeah. Bez's problem last year is a very specific. This rear tyre, which is new for this year, does not work with this Ducati, which is not new for this year. I can't make it work with my riding style. And right from the start, he was saying that, whereas Pecco's come up with so many potential explanations, none of which seem to be working.
The only consistency to both of them has been that the other guy that has been able to make the whole thing work is Marc Marquez.
Yeah,
who was in a GP23 at the same time as Pecco and on a GP25 at the same time as Yeah,
very good point. Got quite a few questions that kind of throw forward to Bez hypotheticals, so I'm going to throw them all up in the air at once, and you can pick what combination of things you want to answer. So Alex Manley asks, would Bez be an option for the factory Ducati team in 2027? So going back to Ducati, presumably to replace Pecco Bagnaia. Would he be doing a better job than Pecco on the second factory Ducati this year? And James Smith, I'm going to throw these up in the air. You can just pick which bits you answer. I think we'll get through them all at once. James Smith says, do you think Bez is a genuine title threat in 2026? And if he was on a GP24, as in the old spec Ducati that Alex Marquez has, would he possibly be in the title battle this year? So where do you want to start with that? Is he a title threat next year? Would he be fighting for the title on Alex Marquez's bike? Should he replace Pecco for 27?
Maybe yes, no.
I've lost track of what order of questions there was, but
he would be a title contender if he was in a GP24 right now. Pretty sure that he'd be doing what Alex Marquez is doing.
I disagree. I think there are no title contenders this year.
I was going to say, it'd be classing title contender as what Alex is doing, because I don't see that.
There is no title contention. There is no title battle. It's a misnomer.
Yeah, okay. So I was going to say he'd be a P2 contender, but you know what? He might actually be one anyway.
Yeah.
Which is pretty
cool.
100
points. I don't think so. That's
Alex Marquez has had a bit of a disaster recently, more than once.
He's sort of stabilized it.
Yeah, he's had two.
Yeah.
He has had two great weekends in a row.
Let's see what happens.
And he's 100 points clear, and there's 100, like there's maybe 200 up for grabs. Like the wheels have to come off. And go into the stratosphere.
Okay. Sorry, Val. He shouldn't replace Pecco, because if the evidence of last year is anything at all to go by, it's that he wouldn't be doing anything different from what Pecco is doing right now on a factory bike alongside Marc. Because again, all those comparisons I just made. And whether or not he's a title contender kind of depends on tomorrow's test. And if what comes with new bikes, like what Ducati do to try and fix the GP25 that they can do, whether or not Aprilia brings something that's a bit better, I don't know. So it'll be interesting to see how that test goes to get a bit of a feel for that. But I don't think it's because the guy that they have to beat is Marc Marquez. If it was Pecco Bagnaia on a GP24 that he had to beat for the title next year, yes, 100%. If it was Pecco Bagnaia and Jorge Martin on GP24s, yeah, absolutely. But against this Marc Marquez.
Speaking of Jorge Martin, obviously still sort of recovering. That physically, I feel Martin has been quite open saying he's going to back now, but he's 6 months behind everybody else in learning this bike, and I feel like this is the greater issue. But we do have a couple of Martin related questions based on Bez's form. Tosin Elojo says, with Marco's current form, does Aprilia go in with Bezzecchi as a clear number one next year, or do they return to treating Martin as a driver to focus on as he tries to regain championship form? Simon, you shook your head straight away there.
Neither. They need the equal number ones. A la Yamaha with Rossi and Lorenzo. Yeah, equal number ones. Keep them in a level footing. It's working quite well at the minute. It has worked quite well this season, where they've kind of tried to be equal with them over the last few races, even as, Bez is winning things and Massimo Rivola is referring to Jorge Martinez having a test race today again. They still need to keep them equal footing. I think that's the only way, because there is an element of ego involved, especially on one side of the garage, maybe more than the other, because one of the bikes has a number one on it. At the end of the day, fair play, he earned it. So I think it's important to but that's a very Aprilia mission. Like that's something that team is quite good at. They're not going to have a problem trying to keep it nice and calm and two equal number ones and convince them that is the reality.
Yeah, the number one thing is almost always feels like a pure hypothetical, that they don't actually speak in those terms in most teams and most factories. I mean, there will be, the only time it is relevant is when you have two riders who are asking for something different, and you have to decide who you're going to spend basically the money on to make that thing, who you're going to spend the development resource on to make that thing, who are you going to put your best engineer on, whatever. If Gigi Dall'Igna pulls an all-nighter, who does he pull the all-nighter for? Whose demand it is? And there's just no sign of that across Bezzecchi and Martin right now, because Martin hasn't had enough time on the bike to request something different, almost, I would say. If that at all comes down the line, there's still no indication of it, no sign of it. Martin seems well aware, fully aware that he just basically needs to figure out how to qualify this thing, and that's the long and short of it. That's the start and the end.
Sorry, I think we've also had like whispers when they were both on Ducatis and both performing quite well, that they're fairly similar. That they're obviously not the same, but they're not looking for anything different from the bike at any one time either. They kind of both move in a similar direction, which makes that job easier.
Does kind of answer Lee Stone's question as well, where he says Martin seems to be stalled in his recovery, which is a concern, don't you think? I guess you guys don't feel he's stalled. It's a different thing showing up now.
It's not linear. I don't think it's almost never linear, this kind of thing. And the amount of rounds he's missed, the amount of mileage all the other riders have accrued, even some of the less healthy riders. I mean, even relative to Miguel Oliveira, Martin is underexperienced.
Half a season behind.
23. Yeah. So I don't think we can look at it linearly and go, okay, you have to be like 1/10 closer this weekend, 1/10 closer this weekend, et cetera, et cetera. It has to, through the ebbs and flows of the tracks, et cetera. And it might not truly come before the end of the season. I think it will, but it might not. But then then you reset in the off season and you sort of start more or less afresh. And then if something is not working, then maybe you ring the alarm bell, whatever the reason for it is, then maybe you start being concerned. But in the position that he's sort of started this batch of the season, there's no reasonable projection you can make right now and be disappointed by it unless he was actually taking steps backwards, which I do not feel is the case. So yeah, not worried.
Yeah, I think the amount of time when he did come back where he was still not really fit enough to be getting a proper sense of things as well, I think has contributed to that. He's been back for however many races now, but it's only really probably the last maybe 3 weekends when it's been right. He's fit. There's nothing else to worry about other than learning this bike now, which is what the position almost everybody else was in February. So
everyone's favorite MotoGP rider right now, Marco Bezzecchi, was no good in his first few runs for Aprilia. No good. Was really struggling. So let's use the same metric. Let's see it the same way, because Jorge Martin is basically doing that same adaptation from the Ducati to the Aprilia, except in his case via the hospital bed. But so let's see. Let's give it a bit of time. Also because he's having to fight riders who are vastly further into their season curve than they are.
And he's having to fight riders he's not used to fighting. He's in the jungle some weekends, and that's a bit of a weird experience for him, as well, as he kind of hinted this evening, Sunday evening. Just to pick up on the fitness thing, he's adamant now that he's fully fit, to the extent that during his media debrief on Sunday evening, he pulled out his Garmin app on his phone to show us that he'd had 192 beats per minute during the race, which is insane. And the reason that he was so excited to show us how high it had been is because his new mate, Lando Norris, weirdly, has been hanging out with him all weekend, and his heart rate goes so much lower during a race because they're not using their kind of cardio system the same way. So they're using more muscle strength but less cardio, and him and Lando have been comparing heart rates, and he's like 50 beats per minute higher during a MotoGP race than Norris is during an F1 race.
I do feel there's a chance that Jorge Martin's heart rate is always 50 beats per minute higher than Lando Norris's, just character-wise. Yeah. One of the most striking parts of the Misano weekend was how often we saw a chain flying off a bike and just kind of rattling around in the air, something we're not actually used to in modern motorbike racing. And each time it was a KTM. It was a ridiculous weekend of really clunky KTM failures, the last of which left Pedro Costa punching the barriers after retiring in a race which he was making really good progress through the top 5 in. Simon, we've heard a few potential explanations for what happened with the KTMs. We've got a lot of questions about it. Marianne Lazowski was just like, what happened with KTM this weekend? Seemed like they were getting some good momentum. It came to a screeching halt. Alex Bradbury Hall says, why did it all go so wrong for KTM? They've never really had reliability problems, from what I can remember. And Nando Loris, Jorge Martin's mate, or
no relation to Jorge
Martins,
yeah. Obviously. We need someone to now sign up for Members Club with Jorge Martin as their name. Nando Loris says, why are KTM buying their chains from Temu? Simon.
So the problem, first of all, the problem wasn't the chain. The problem was the bike breaking the chain. And we kind of know that because one of Brad Binder's wasn't a broken chain. It was the chain jumping off the sprocket, and he was then able to put it back on and ride the bike home. We know. Yeah, so he was all proud of himself because he'd done mechanicking. So we know that, the cause of it is basically that the chain is being stretched too much. And I mean, speaking to a few people in the paddock this weekend, it seems like the biggest contributing factor to that is ride height devices, because that you need the chain longer because the bike is longer, basically. So it's stretching it out. It means that then that the chain is a little bit loose. Brad Binder's theory is that it was the curbs then, that the big bumps over the curbs was what was stressing the chain. A few others have suggested that it's swing arm flex, which I don't think it is, because that doesn't really, I don't think it would flex to that degree. But I mean, coming from a background in the Isle of Man TT, road racing, broken chains are much more common there because they have jumps. And it's to do with that kind of when the back wheel is off the air and it unloads it and then you load it again, it kind of kicks and it can snap a chain. And I think maybe there's an element to Binder's theory that's correct, where they've got a chain that's already stretched and stressed because of the ride height devices, and then the curbs here are kind of causing that kick effect. And remember that the curbs here, those big steep curbs that we've brought in to prevent people from exceeding track limits, are universally known as Misano curbs, because this is the place that invented them. So that so they're quite aggressive here, and I think that makes sense. 3 broken chains over the weekend. One of Brad Binder's actually messed up his whole weekend because it was in his number 1 much preferred bike, and whenever the chain went, it shattered the carbon fiber swing arm, because you've got a very high speed piece of metal whipping around in a carbon fiber space. And then that he had to use his number 2 bike. His number 2 bike broke down in the sprint. It just damaged his qualifying performance. So really ruined their whole weekend, and they've got to find a way to fix it. Weirdly, one thing that we noticed over the weekend is that it looks like Aprilia and the Yamaha V4 is running like a chainstay, like a chain guard that keeps the chain in place. And it might be that others have had this problem or identified that this might be a problem and are already, kind of working around it. So I'd imagine KTM might even have a late night tonight, because some of this might even be something that they can fix in the box with like their 3D printers.
Yeah,
because they might be able to actually 3D print plastic like chain guards. So it'll be interesting to see tomorrow what if they try anything, or if not, what's in the box in Motegi.
The interesting thing with this, Val, as well, is that obviously, given how KTM started its season, winter of financial turmoil, rumours it wouldn't even be on the grid that long, to have 3 embarrassing, quite fundamental failures with a big bit flopping off the bike like that, it invites this, okay, they've run out of cash to put their bike together properly kind of talk. But it really does sound like this is a specific issue, and it's not whatever else KTM does, which is usually wildly up and down form where they sometimes go missing. Bikes breaking down hasn't really been their thing, has it? This to me comes across like a thing that can be fixed, and then they move on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also, I mean, there's no indication it would happen at a different track necessarily. It's clearly something specific to this track that was making it happen. I'm not quite sure if it was always on the same part of the track. I don't think so, but you do the same corners over and over again in any case.
Pedro's and one of Brad's was, I think, were both out of 6.
That sounds correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
In any case, it is really embarrassing, regardless of their previous reliability record or not. And it's, Simon talking about like overnight fixes. Should have done those overnight night ago, I guess, because they toileted the only good thing about their weekend is gone. So nobody could do anything on the KTM this weekend because it was an unwieldy, nervous kind of basically wreck with a mismatch in grip balance front to rear that wasn't going good through the fast corners of Sector 3 in particular, at least in Bastianini's case. Acosta was making it work, more or less. I mean, obviously he crashed rather stupidly in qualifying, but he was the only KTM rider running competitive. And of course, then it had to happen on his bike while he was on to salvage some sort of result from a not good weekend. So it's, it happens, but when it's the 3rd failure of this kind of the weekend on your most important bike in the most important session this time, I don't know. It's not like if I was engineering it would do much in terms of mileage, but that's, as unacceptable as reliability failures can go, this is very high up there. This is very, very shameful.
Speaking of things you find shameful and unacceptable, Val, Pecco Bagnaia time.
Oh, dear Lord. Okay.
That's a great segue because he was next on the list and you were like, Val's in Fury mode. We're going to have Fury mode later. We've got Fury mode on the list. But
should we reveal something like sort of behind the scenes a little bit about the circumstances of this Bagnaia discussion?
I think we should do this.
So I'm currently sitting in the media center watching the media center door for Pecco Bagnaia to turn up at 18:42 for a media session that was originally scheduled for 16:45. So he's sorry, 15:45. So he's 3 hours late because they're in meetings. And he will turn up because it's Pecco and he always does turn up at some point. But there is obviously some very big discussions going on, like literally directly below me in the garage, in the Ducati garage right now.
And, rightly so, because it's not the first weekend Pecco has struggled, obviously, but it's his first 0 score of the weekend. And I think the thing that strikes me about this weekend is how unremarkable Bagnaia having a rubbish race has become. So 3 examples of this. I was watching the TNT sports coverage, and Bagnaia crashing out got the most kind of verbal shrug from the commentary team. It wasn't how many times a Bagnaia crash at any point, basically since he became a factory Ducati rider, should at least get some kind of shriek. It was just a shrug. It's just like, oh, that's sad, that kind of vibe. Val, in your race report for the race website, Pecco Bagnaia crashing out was basically in the bottom par because no one's waiting to read how Pecco Bagnaia did. You don't actually have to tick him off that much higher up. And then before this recording started, when we were discussing it being his first 0 score of the year, I was like, seriously? Second.
Le Mans was the first.
Yeah, of course, Le Mans. This first one for like actual kind of performance reasons, effectively.
Yes.
He was not fast to score a point in the sprint and then just crashed out when on course to do something mediocre in the Grand Prix. This is just life for Pecco now. Paul Eagles said, how much worse can things get for Pecco in what has already been a bad season? This weekend was an utter shit show. And Jed asks, has Ducati almost given up on Pecco, or is that just the way it looks on TV? It seems like Gigi Dall'Igna and Davide Tardozzi are always with Marc, and Pecco is on his own. We will have a lot of Ducati insight in the next episode of the podcast because Megan's been embedded with them this weekend. With the way that trip worked out, she's currently flying back from her time at Ducati, so she can reveal what kind of seating proximity she spied in the garage between the riders and the team bosses. But Simon, from your take in the paddock, does it look like Pecco is looking abandoned? I mean, they're certainly spending time with him right now while we're recording this podcast.
No, it doesn't. And I know I've said this many times. You should never really kind of frame the relationship from what you see on TV because it's such a small snapshot of actual weekends. And we're at a point now where his press officer is messaging me to say, I don't know when he's coming, because they're so deep into a technical meeting that they've been in for at least an hour and a half at this point. So there's your answer to have they forgotten him. Obviously not, because that's the level of attention they're paying to him right now. It's just that all that attention's not working. And it might be that they're deep in a technical meeting trying to solve all their problems right now, or it might be that Pecco has stolen Franco Morbidelli's GP24 and is currently painting it red so that he can ride it tomorrow without anyone supposedly noticing. But I mean, that kind of feels like the only thing they can do now to fix this. Because, like, to answer Paul's question, it can't get any worse. The last 2 weekends combined, that's it. That is rock bottom. At those 2 circuits with those performances, it cannot get any worse. Because, like, there's probably an element of it now where, like, an injury would bring a welcome relief because he'd get to sit on the sofa and not ride the thing for a couple of weeks. It's that bad. And what else can they do? Joking aside, I think they actually should let him ride a GP24 tomorrow because, we've been talking for a long time about the scales of this, where at the start of the year, it was like 90% a bike problem and 10% a confidence problem. And the longer it's gone on and the worse it's got, it's the scales have tipped where it's like 70-30 confidence now. And at least let him ride a GP24 at the test tomorrow and just let him come in, go out, be a second and a half quicker than Marquez, and come in at the end of the day and be like, you know what, it's entirely the bike, it's not me. We need to start having a conversation about what machine we're going to ride next year. Because at least then you tip the scales back to it being a bike problem. Because what else do you do right now? What else can they do?
It was okay on Friday. He qualified, I'd say, fairly well. It was like a 10th off mark or something like that. There's a really, really small gap. And there was a gap of 4 positions. But in terms of, don't look at positions, look at the gaps. Always look at the gaps. And in terms of the gap, it wasn't huge. So there's going to be a bit of luck in that. So when the sprint came around, and obviously Marc, crashed out of the sprint, he got the same out of the sprint as Pecco. But just because of how stark the difference was on live timing, I immediately after the sprint, instead of like doing any of the actual work I'm usually supposed to do, I went to the MotoGP feed and was like, okay, I'm pulling up these 2 onboards and I'm watching them. I'm trying to like, what can I see? And my untrained, generally useless analysis is everything looked terrible on Bagnaia's side. Like Marquez crashed out, but he looked insanely comfortable following Bezzecchi, like just dancing around, braking as late as he could into corners, taking whatever line he needed to take to stay right on Bezzecchi's tail. And for Bagnaia, everything looked so labored, so heavy, and this is the same bike, but he's like blowing corner entries all the time. It's like the changes of direction looked really, really rough. It's hard to say on acceleration because obviously acceleration will be, it will look always worse because, the gap stretches out naturally coming out of the corner. But nothing
and
looks
accelerations
good.
are hard to do wrong on a current MotoGP bike.
Exactly. There was somehow a very perceptible difference between this guy's coming into the corner late, but he's always going to make the corner. He's totally under control. And this guy's coming in late, and you're like, every single time you're nervous that, like, not that he's going to crash necessarily, but he's going to end up on the runoff. He's going to end up on the green yellow. Yellow.
Yeah, it's multicolored.
Blue.
It's Misano. Aldo Judy designed it. It's multicolored. Yeah. You've just picked up on something really interesting from a few conversations I've had in the paddock this weekend with people about why isn't Pecco crashing? Because there's people now asking, like, is he like so far away from the limit that is that a confidence issue? Is he, because we've seen Marc Marquez struggling. Remember, like, the 2021-22 season on Honda when he was just throwing the bike away every weekend. Like,
struggling, but sure. Yeah.
I'm thinking of like that Saxon Wing weekend.
No.
But he ended his Honda.
He's still the fastest Honda. Like, he's struggling relative to...
No, I know. But he was destroying bikes trying to go faster.
Absolutely.
And Pecco is just not doing that. And is that indicative of where he's at from a feeling confidence point of view?
Well, he did it today, obviously, and we're yet to find out
he did.
why exactly. But I also thought it was quite interesting that it was entering turn 9, and it was the same turn 9 where on Saturday, one of the moments he didn't make the corner and he let 2 more bikes through. Yeah. And then I ran out of time to watch the rest of the onboard. Then I checked the results and I was stunned to find out that at some point he let another bike through in some moment, another bike that he should not be being beaten by. I don't know what the conclusion of this is, apart from me saying, hey, I've watched 2 onboards and my finding is he's toast. Cool. Great.
You had to watch
great
onboards.
Content. Yeah.
You could have just looked at the championship results, but
Well, this is it. The conclusion just isn't there. Like, we've had Pecco come in whichever race it was and go.
Sorry, I'm just going to throw this in here right now because I've just got a message that says Pecco Bagnaia will not speak to the media today.
That's kind of helps us out in terms of planning this episode. So
it's very out of character, though.
It is, isn't it? So I was going to say at the end of the segment, listeners/viewers, that you can check out on the website exactly what Pecco said. We will never know what Pecco would have said. Well, I say never. He'll probably speak after the test on Monday because I guess most of them should be speaking after the test. But yeah, that is very, very unlike Pecco. And I doubt that is him going, I'm sure everyone's gone home, because I expect he'll be well aware that people would be waiting to find out what he was going to say about this happening at Misano of all places. The place where he wins races because he knows the rain smells different here. And this year, this happens.
Although Val, weirdly, and sorry, I love that our readers are finding out what this is like in real time. The message has now been deleted. So let's see what happens next.
Okay.
Welcome to MotoGP Media Debriefs. This is what they're like.
But normally 3 hours earlier in the afternoon.
Yeah.
This is it. The trouble is, even if Pecco finally does come and talk to you and says, we've found it, or the opposite, nothing makes sense anymore and nothing means anything for the next time he gets onto that bike. He's had debriefs where he's come and gone, this felt great today, and then the next day it's terrible. He's had debriefs where he's come and gone, I could push so hard I crashed. And we're supposed to take that as proof that something's great, and then it's still terrible. Friday, he was quick. He's never quick on Fridays, and it still then meant absolutely nothing again.
The only interesting thing he can say today is they're going to let me ride a GP24.
They just sent a 2-minute voice note with the confirmation that he's not going to. So he's sort of done his media debrief by himself.
Oh, yeah, there it is. It's back now.
Do we want to listen to that and then reconvene?
Let's take a pause.
Yeah.
Okay, we're back. Val and Simon have listened to what Pecco said. I chose not to. I just watched their facial expressions. Val coughed 4 times and burped once. Simon looked quite thoughtful. Val also nodded several times. So, Val,
I think Simon also coughed, so this is...
Oh, yeah, Simon coughed 3 times, but yours
feels
became...
like... I feel targeted, you know? I feel singled out, not
because you sound like you're...
Then you shouldn't burp on a podcast if you don't want to be singled out.
I wouldn't say I burped on a podcast. I burped.
Yeah, my kids would apologize for that.
I'm not going to publicly apologize for a burp none of them heard. Anyway.
What did Pecco have to say? Now, it wasn't quite what we were hoping for, was it?
It's the TV recording from before the meeting that he went into and has not emerged from yet. So, I can just sum it up as a shrug of the shoulders, basically. A slightly resigned shrug of the shoulders and the continuation of...
I actually think it sounded slightly more resigned than we've heard. It kind of sounded like the first real this year's over.
We thought Friday Barcelona debrief was that because his mood after that practice day where he was just excruciatingly slow was bad enough. But
that one was like the sudden shock. If we're doing the stages of grief, we're at acceptance. That was what we've just heard felt like. And it's a bit different because it's a TV interview, and I don't like judging things too much off TV interviews because people change how they sound when there's a camera on their face. And it'll be really useful to talk to him tomorrow, which I'm pretty sure he will do at the test. But that sounded very resigned to just, we're not going to fix this year.
I just want to say, more separately, the Bagnaia problem is threefold. There are 3 things at play here, and he needs to fix all 3 to return to the level that he must be at, and I don't know how possible that is. So level number 1 is just the baseline deficit to Marc Marquez, potentially the greatest rider of all time. What can you do? Level number 2 is the lack of affinity with the current bike, and the hope that once you get to a bike that's doesn't have the oddities and particularities of this one, that it's at least going to be respectable. And level 3 is he can't sprint race at all, even a little bit. So that's 3 fairly fundamental things to fix. And if you fix just 2 of them, that's not good enough. Certainly if you don't fix the sprint thing in some form, even if you find a more, you can't do last year's sprint business anymore with Marc as your teammate. That's gone. Jorge Martin in whatever year of his career he was could have allowed that a little bit, and even then you lost the title to him. Against Marc, you obviously cannot do it. This just, I've already said some form of this season, but this is why it's as catastrophic in my eyes as I've been talking about it. Is it's multi-layered. It's not just one thing for me. It's not just you find the bike that you liked and suddenly everything's rosy. But it certainly would be rosier than this, I imagine.
There was a point on Friday when I thought we might lead this podcast on the performance of the Yamaha V4 as it finally made its first appearance where we could all see it. Now, we will definitely feature the Yamaha V4 in a video on our YouTube channel. I expect it might crop up in the next episode of the podcast as well. Val, Friday, we were all really excited by what Augusto Fernandez was doing on that bike. Then things tailed off. Now, we thought we couldn't read, if you're just listening to this, Val did an amazing thumbs up and thumbs down gesture. We knew we weren't going to read gallons into this wildcard outing. The Monday test, when the race riders get to not just ride it, because they have already, but actually ride it and talk about it will be more revealing. But what's your take on how things progressed from that Perky Friday?
It was a very funny weekend because on Thursday, the Yamaha riders who tried it in Barcelona the Monday before were basically barred from speaking. Journalists were asked not to ask about the V4 test. So those who did want to speak about it those who did want to speak about it in some roundabout way could sort of offer hints and clues. And one of the hints and clues that Alex Rins offered was, wouldn't it be something crazy if the V4 beat the inline fours here, or at least some of the inline fours, which you can be uncharitable and read as a commentary on the current performance level of Alex Rins. Don't be mean, but but you can be. It's not totally incorrect. But clearly, I think what they did see was generally encouraging, although potentially everything is generally encouraging when you stop riding the current Yamaha inline four masterpiece that it has been for several years now. The V4 was really good out of the blocks on Friday. Just the early runs already, you look at the lap time range that it's in, you're like, okay, so this is not 2 seconds off necessarily. This is in the ballpark. You've brought a generally competitive MotoGP machine here. The fast lap Augusto Fernandez did it was Friday. So the fast lap he did on Friday, he did sort of in the wheel tracks of Fabio Quartararo, but not really. Fabio was, I think, a few seconds up the road. So I don't know how much lap time benefit there is. It was very quick. It was 0.6 of Fabio, who wasn't in his best weekend form yet. But that's crazy, isn't it? That's just insane. So 0.6 of Fabio with a test rider on the all new bike that's doing its like first proper time attack. And then kind of the rest of the weekend, it sounds like Augusto and the test team have spent like crashing it and trying to change it a little bit and making it worse and sort of running out of pace. So didn't quite live up to those early lofty heights. But I think, honestly, that I'd seen enough of what I needed to see on Friday. They've got it to a level where it's viable. So it's certainly not DOA. It was positive. I thought it was really positive. Even sort of ignoring the ropey weekend that followed, I thought it really, really caught my eye. It was an eyebrow raiser.
The points thing is a bit of a misnomer, because I think that screws a little bit the level on Sunday, but makes it look like a bit better than it was. But it's solid.
Yeah.
It's just solid. And actually, what's really surprised me was I've spent a fair bit of time like sniffing around it this weekend in pit lane and in the Yamaha box. You know, I've got my special pit lane pass that I need as well to get up close to that. This isn't just a carriage for a new engine. They've done some really cool stuff with this. You can see where they're like working on really interesting things with like swing arm thickness and stuff like that. That's really unusual. They've genuinely, they're not just trying a new engine into this. They're working on all sorts of things. It's cool.
No, like you said when you first saw it on Thursday, the aero looks so much more integrated than Yamaha aero designs have before. It's like they're tackling a bunch of problems all at once. All the attention's on the engine, but this does feel more like Yamaha's kind of big statement of what it takes to get back on track at last. Now, we will see this bike racing again. Augusto Fernandez has at least one more wild card planned.
He will do Sepang and he will do Valencia. Sorry.
Valencia.
I'm getting confused. The season finales, but yeah, they'll do Sepang instead of Motegi specifically to like stress test it in the heat, and then they'll do Valencia because it's the season finale, and then you do the post race test.
There'd been a lot of talk about whether if it was brilliant, the race riders might get their hands on it. Simon, that's not possible, and you can explain exactly why in a second. But Dan Neal, in his usual glorious barrage of questions, most of which I think we've got through with other people's, but his point that really did interest me. Actually, that sounded harsh. Dan, they all interested me. This was one that no one else asked. That's why I've picked this one. So will Yamaha just consider taking disqualifications so it could get the full-time riders racing on it this season? So, Simon, explain why they would get disqualified if they did try to put any of their usual quartet on this bike.
Mm-hmm. So, 2 reasons. One is that they've already used their 2 aero homologations of the season, and they then therefore can't do anything else with that. So they would be presumably disqualified for using different aero if they turned up with it. They would also they also have to pick at the start of the season their gearbox ratios, and they can change those, but they have to pick them from a set list of, we think, and when I say we think, I talked to someone very, very senior at the Motorcycle Sports Manufacturers Association. He was like, I can't remember numbers. I deal with a lot of numbers. I think it's 7 primaries and 3 secondaries, but I'm not sure. So there's a number that they have to kind of homologate at the start of the season, and the V delivers its power in such a different way from the inline 4 that they can't just use the same gearbox internals. So that also would have to be something that they can't do. And I thought about this thing about them, could they just run it anyway and risk being disqualified? I think the problem with that is that if you're disqualified from every session, I think that means technically you wouldn't qualify to race. And even if you did qualify, you would qualify at the back of the grid because your qualifying time wouldn't count.
I also just think in modern MotoGP, you just like with all the corporate obligations and stuff, you just can't get away with it. You can't send out a press release after every race going, DSQ, we ran a legal bike again.
Yes.
But it's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
We have quite a few questions in Patreon this week about the TV direction from this weekend. Now, there's not a lot to say about this that's going to be a debate, because I think we can all agree that large parts of it were awful. Annie said, which other sport do you reckon TV direction we're following today? It certainly wasn't MotoGP. Matthias Kint says, what are the odds Liberty will fix the questionable TV direction? Not catching the Joan Mir Johan Zarco incident, the Maverick Vinales incident, or the Ayagura incident was a bit disappointing. Mike Falcone says, was this the worst TV coverage of the year? I'm still wondering what happened with Mir and Zarco. You two didn't enjoy this either. Simon and Val wrote a blistering combined column on the way the TV cut to Rossi fans cheering Marc Marquez's crash on Saturday, and how just the fact they were cheering Marquez's crash was abysmal enough, and then effectively celebrating it with the TV shots was worse, if anything. This wasn't great. I don't know what else we can say other than this wasn't great.
This is going to be absolutely remarkable to both of you and regular listeners of the podcast, but in the defense of Dorna's TV direction.
What? Oh, wow. Whoa.
They won't admit it. And I tried to speak to them to get them to admit it, and they won't admit it. But I think they were having behind the scenes technical problems on Sunday.
Okay.
Because they told me that they didn't have footage of a couple of the incidents. And I've seen the footage that they have. They have footage of it. And I think they were having problems switching between feeds and between replays, but they don't want to say that. And this kind of then all come out a little bit later in the day whenever the press conference TV broadcast kind of fell apart. But obviously the fundamental difference is that in the main race, you've got like 30 cameras to flick between. So whenever something fails, you flick to another camera, whereas in the press conference, you've only got 2. And I think that's where we kind of exposed that there was a bit of weakness. So there's 2 issues here. Saturday's coverage was awful, and the whole cutting to the cheering Rossi fans was awful, because as someone in TV pointed out to me, the fact that they were able to cut to cheering Rossi fans when Marquez crashed means they had a camera pointed at cheering Rossi fans just in case they knew it was coming.
Well,
they knew that what the response would be.
Well, yeah, but the response could have been a happy one to Rossi protege Marco Bezzecchi winning a race.
It could have been, but that wasn't what was shown. No. But I think that's separate from the issue on Sunday that kind of led to just a mess of broadcast. Like we didn't see Alex Rins and Augusto Fernandez jump the start, and we didn't see Alex Rins, Augusto Fernandez, and Jorge Martin do 6 long laps between them for various infringements.
Yep.
Never mind the fact that we didn't see Joan Mir crash into Johan Zarco and take him out of the race, and Johan Zarco helping Mir pick up his bike instead of his own first, which is very, very nice of the Frenchman. But we missed all of that, and then we missed a lot of other crashes. We missed Ayagura's crash, we missed Maverick Vinales' crash, and I think that's why. And it'll be interesting to see if the footage kind of slowly appears on social media over the next coming weeks, days.
Well, I have a funny story to tell. This weekend was the penultimate round of Moto E, probably ever. Rest in peace, Moto E. If listeners haven't heard that the series is on hiatus at the end of this year,
hiatus.
When something's on hiatus, there's a good chance that it's not coming back. But
hiatus is a long spelling of being, isn't it?
There was it's the penultimate round. The title fight is heated up. Basically, they're not that many people are watching, but those who are watching are getting some pretty good racing. And I try to watch whenever there's time on the weekend, which is usually made a little difficult by the scheduling, etc. But that's that's neither here nor there. So the first race of the weekend, the very important weekend, starts, and as the lights go out, the broadcast cuts to a replay of a camera pointed at another camera, and then it returns back to the grid shot where the bike's already moving. I've never seen that happen in any major production ever of a motor race. I just went while Simon was talking. I just went to check it because I wanted to make sure I didn't hallucinate it while on codeine or something. But no, it actually did happen. So, yeah, good weekend.
Yeah, there were problems.
Yeah, I am still kind of reeling a little bit from the fact that I think this must be a first to the Race MotoGP podcast, where I throw to Simon thinking this will be one of those rants where I'm thinking, is he going to get kicked out of the paddock? And he comes back with a really reasonable, understanding explanation. So I don't really know what to say now. So I think the only thing I can do is throw in James Reinberg's question to finish off. Completely unrelated to the race.
James.
Mm-hmm. Completely unrelated to the race. And I don't especially expect this to get answered. It's getting answered. But what is going on with Jorge Lorenzo and his Ferris wheel? Please explain, one of you.
Jorge Lorenzo has bought a Ferris wheel
Obviously.
in a town in the south
As
of
you do.
Italy.
Yeah,
Which and someone has stolen it,
as you do.
which is the short version of the story, which sounds completely ludicrous. The longer version is slightly more sane in that he bought a functioning Ferris wheel in a town that cost him 1.4 million. That is a bit of a tourist attraction in that I know that is, but where do you hear the rest? That is a bit of a tourist attraction in the town, right? And makes money. So it's actually maybe not a terrible investment. And someone that he trusted as a friend has been running it for him, but they've also not been paying him the monthly income that they agreed to pay him. Which it turns out he's owed 200,000 euros, which means actually the Ferris wheel is not that bad an investment. Because if he's owed 200,000 euros in 18 months, then they've at least paid him some of the money. So that's all right, actually. I mean, I don't know what the maintenance costs on a Ferris wheel are. Do they depreciate like a used BMW? I don't know. But they've not been paying him, so he's now taking legal action to get his money back. And I think what he's most annoyed about, and I need to go and find this because I haven't had time this weekend, is that the Ferris wheel has an Instagram account. And the Instagram account is still claiming that the Ferris wheel is owned by Jorge Lorenzo as part of their marketing strategy. Amazing. You couldn't as I told someone on social media over the weekend, say what you want about the differences in MotoGP and Formula One, but Sebastian Vettel has never bought a waltzer.
I want to say who among us hasn't purchased the Ferris wheel and then ended up in a situation like this, but I feel that's honestly needlessly harsh because I like a lot of the sportsmen who make a lot of money just like put it into like venture capital firms or whatever and like just do stuff that maybe I don't love so much. This guy bought a Ferris wheel. That's
gotta love that.
And I mean, he's got I know he's got a garage at home with a Ferrari F40, a Ferrari Enzo, and an FXX in it.
Well,
he invests his money in
not as cool.
pretty. I mean,
well, it's more obvious. It's
I agree.
Other sports people have done that.
Yeah.
If the story was about someone not paying him the rent on the apartment building he'd bought,
yes,
it would be much less entertaining. However, he didn't buy an apartment building; he bought a Ferris wheel, and only Jorge Lorenzo in MotoGP would buy a Ferris wheel and not an apartment building, and that's what makes it wonderful.
Absolutely.
Is it weird when I think of Ferris wheel? I can't imagine any real life Ferris wheel because I don't like to go outside, so I can only imagine the one in GTA 5.
Now you lose me. I was going to say, Jorge Lorenzo, if you want one that would cost, I'm sure, a lot less than 1.4 million, there's one down the road from me in Exmouth that I bet is way cheaper. So buy that one.
Someone
please
did point out, someone in the paddock did point out, and this is a niche reference that Val will get and Matt might not, that someone right now is preparing a pitch to sell him the Ferris wheel in Pripyat.
Yep. I think I even know who in the paddock that would be.
Yeah, can you guys explain that to me when we finish recording? Because I think this is a good time to stop this podcast.
It's a Call of Duty thing, right?
Okay, great.
Well, I mean, there is actually there is actually a Ferris wheel next to Chernobyl. Like, it's there in real life as well.
We need to end this podcast. We're in the habit now of just having to end the podcast by me saying, stop this podcast. We'll be back next week. We may be back before then if the test is really, really interesting on Monday, but I need these guys to explain a lot of things to me first. Let's stop there.